All right, it being 5:30 p.m. on Tuesday, March 26th, 2024. We'll begin this evening's joint meeting with the Finance Committee. The first item on the agenda is the ALS paramedic implementation study. And we have the consultant is here to present the results. You'd introduce yourself. So we need, I think you might have to hold the mic.
Close to it.
It might be easier, or I'm sure maybe if Mark's around.
I can do that.
Perfect.
So I'm Robert Finn. I'm a senior manager with Matrix Consulting Group, and I lead our fire and EMS consulting practice. Previously, we had done ALS feasibility study for the town, looking at options for providing EMS services, and then as a follow-up study to that, the implementation for how those various options could be implemented. So tonight, I'm happy to present you with the results of the study. Just a little bit about us. We've been in business for 20 years, have worked in 42 states, and have done well over 400 fire and EMS studies in Massachusetts and across the country. All of our team has extensive experience, both as people that worked in public safety, in fire-based EMS, as well as people that are lifelong consultants, financial analysts, the GIS analysts, and the others who do this kind of project. The key to our work is extensive stakeholder input and fact-based, data-driven decisions, so that we're getting is information and recommendations that are right for Clinton and are implementable, instead of something that would potentially be shelved. So for this project, really 4 key steps: initiating the project.
Excuse me, please.
Yep.
Could you address us also? We
Yes.
can't catch all you're saying.
Trying to stay toward the camera, but happy to. So in this study, really four key phases of the project: the initiation, where we conducted interviews, collected data that was needed for the study from the town and the fire department, looked at what the current state is, so what had changed since our last study. Were there any changes to the finances, deployment, staffing makeup of the fire department, so that we understood what the current state of the fire department looked like. And then we evaluated the system options, from what would the staffing needs be, what would the financing needs be, what are the key advantages, disadvantages, or obstacles for any of those being a real feasible option for the town to consider, and then ultimately brought all that together in a draft and final report that was delivered to the town. So one of the options was looking at a third-party ALS transport. So that is contracting with a local ambulance provider, for-profit service, where they would provide the transport services. So similar to what you're doing with Sterling, the fire department will respond and provide that initial basic life support care. But in terms of transporting the patient and taking them to the hospital in emergent advanced life support situations, it would be done by a third party. What's beneficial about this for the town is that it allows rapid startup. It's you negotiate with a third party, you sign the contract, and they're able to roll the resources into town. One of the other key things is then you're not responsible for the staffing and being the employer of those employees. It's up to the third party contractor to make sure that that works. The disadvantages to this type of system and reasons that we didn't think it worked as well for you. One is the way your fire department is currently staffed and deployed, using the personnel on your ambulances are also firefighters. And when you look at an effective response force and what's needed to mitigate an emergency scene upon arrival, taking those folks away from the response force would leave the fire department unable to meet OSHA mandates of 2 in and 2 out. So it would require you staffing more people on the fire apparatus because currently that ambulance crew is used for that. So not a lot of cost savings coming from the staffing component, but now you're bringing in a lot of cost by bringing in a private EMS provider. You don't get much control of the level of service delivery, the way those systems work, unless you're willing to pay a significant amount. Towns like yours, they use a regional response model. So they'll have a unit staged somewhere and they're responding to several locales based on typical call demand and service needs. So you may not have an ambulance in Clinton all the time. When that ambulance is then used for transport in any of those, they backfill with another ambulance from somewhere else. In the event of a concurrent call, that often leads to extended response times for the advanced life support component because they're not immediately available. There's always the potential when you're dealing with a for-profit agency that they're like, this one isn't working out for us, we're losing money. So when it comes time for contract renewal, either, the cost drivers go up or they decide that they're not going to renew with the town. And then you're in a position where you're going to have to find a different service provider. And then the big driver was in terms of the impact of the cost of the EMS system today, this one increases it by more than $2 million ongoing. So you're basically adding another $2 million to the cost of providing EMS services and not getting those savings through some other staffing change to the fire department.
Mr. Chairman,
Sure.
can I just ask a question on your bullet 4, the 2 million per annual cost? What things are driving that 2 million cost?
So,
Yes, I don't know if you go back approximately. And
Yeah,
so that's annual cost. I was just,
yeah,
that seemed like an
going
upward
that. So
money.
they're charging you for the ambulance.
Yeah.
They're charging you for the personnel. They're charging you for the equipment. They're prorating that. And then you have to remember they're for profit. So when we met with a couple of regional EMS providers in this area and just gave them the high level, we're working with a client and here's about how many calls they run. Here's how many of them are ALS. Here's how many are BLS. Here's the current payer mix. And then they factor all that in and they say, well, here's about what, a good rough estimate for our services. And it's an additional $2 million above what you're paying today.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, so if we took like last year, I think we paid Sterling a little bit over $100,000. Again, I don't understand how it escalates out to 2 million per year.
Well, you're getting a good deal with Sterling. So
So you're saying that should go to a bid type of thing?
no,
Yeah.
so what Sterling does is they charge you per response, basically for the use of their staff time. But Sterling's not for profit. So their model is not to make money off of you. These for-profit companies are part of a larger EMS system and each one of their business segments would need to be profitable. So in looking at you as part of this regional response, that's the rough numbers I came up with.
But that's if we didn't use Sterling or the surrounding.
This would be your third party EMS transport. So private company doing third party transport.
I think there used to be Patriot. Was that would be Vital. So that would be hiring a company like Vital to handle it.
Right.
Question. What's the usual term of these third-party contracts?
They range from 1 to 3 years, depending on how you negotiate it, is typical.
Thank you.
So then we looked at providing the service in-house, but using per diem staffing. So this is where the fire department would hire personnel. They're paid a certain amount, hourly wage per diem, but they're not full-time benefited employees of the town. They would work typically a 12-hour shift and then go home. So two ways these personnel could be used. The most typical in the per diem model is that you're hiring off-duty paramedics that either work for one of these for-profits or they may be a paramedic at a neighboring fire and EMS agency. And they would come in and staff your units on a per diem basis on their days off. The advantages to that, again, you can start immediate hiring and onboarding, training them if they're in the current medical control system, which is what guides your patient care and what types of medications you use and what the standard treatment protocols are for patients. Then they can onboard rather quickly. Others would have to go through and be checked off by the medical director to make sure that they're competent in patient care under that doctor's license. The staffing cost is fixed. You're going to know that we need X number of 12-hour positions staffed. Here's what we're paying hourly, and there's no overtime. There's no benefit costs, and it's got the lowest impact on your general fund. And we'll go over those and show what the different cost impacts are. The disadvantage is to add that per diem. Your current contract doesn't allow for per diem staffing, so you would have to negotiate that with the bargaining unit to get per diem allowed as part of it. It is an unstable labor force, so I'm doing it because I want to buy a boat. Well, I get the money for my down payment on my boat. Now I don't need to do it anymore, so I stopped doing it. I'm single, and then I get married, and my spouse says, I don't want you being gone so much. You're already gone for your fire station for 24 hours, and now you're gone another 12 on your days off. So it's not a workforce that you're going to count on someone being with you for a career. It's a short-term use for them. If you work them over 20 hours, then you would have to pay benefits. So they really have a very fixed amount of time they can work. So you couldn't put them on a 24-hour shift. The best you could really do is a 12 or a 16-hour shift, either 12, 16s or 8s to be able to keep them under that 20-hour-a-week threshold. The other was looking at internal with full-time staffing, and the full-time staffing can go two ways. One, it could be full-time paramedic only staffing, where these personnel are hired to staff the ambulance, and they're at a lower rate than what a firefighter paramedic would be. But that gives you the same problem of now you've put non-fire personnel on your ambulances. You're going to have to upstaff the engine companies to make sure you can meet the 2 in, 2 out rules. So your minimum staffing on just your engines is going to have to go up to 4, which means you're going to have extra personnel on both the EMS units now and on your fire units to minimize the impact of overtime when people are off for vacation, sick or that. So using the sole paramedic model staffing is not recommended. We recommended the firefighter paramedic, where you can train existing fire personnel to the paramedic level, use any existing fire personnel that are already trained to paramedic level, and then train others that wish to be that. Once you have a feel for how many folks that is, then you can start to look at how to fill the staffing gaps. So to staff one ambulance with your shifting pattern, at a minimum, you're going to need 3 paramedics just to start. And that gives you 1 on every shift. There's a paramedic and an EMT on the ambulance. They're able to respond and respond to ALS. But now you have no relief factor for when this person's sick, when this person takes vacation, if they go on military leave. So you immediately need that second person just for backfill. And then there's always the rotation. So when you looked at our staffing model, the ideal number would be to ultimately get to 12. But when you're at 6, now you've got a buffer of 1 can be off and you've still got a second paramedic. When you get to 9, then you're really in a good sweet spot of there's depth to the system and you're able to do it. But you can operate initially when the first 3 are there. And if you make the decision to brown out the ALS transport component and use Sterling now in a lesser fashion, look, we don't have a paramedic on today, so we're going to use you for ALS. there's still that to work with them and lessen the impact, because I know one of the drivers of this is as your calls for service demand continue to increase, then it's more of a stress on and strain on Sterling systems. So having reduced that may be a fair partnership that they're willing to work with. This again gives you that stable, steady workforce. They're employees of the town. They're benefited employees. Most people get into the fire service as a career. So you'll be looking at people that want to make their career doing this. And then when we surveyed your neighboring communities and looked at other studies we had done, about a 10% increase is typical for the pay for these folks. That can go two ways. Some communities choose to do it as a stipend. So we pay, X dollars as a stipend to all of our paramedics. Others do it as a percentage of salary. So if you're on a step program, then every time they get a raise to a new step, then that 10% would increase their salary just a little more. The disadvantage to this is there are the upfront costs of now you have to buy the advanced life support equipment. You already own the ambulances, so that's a good thing. There's no changes or modifications that are needed to the actual ambulances. But when we looked at the possibility for having to add more staff due to the transition, when you're maybe overhiring the fire department to make sure you have enough paramedics and then let typical turnover kind of get you back to the right size, we looked at the potential for remodeling the old fire station for administration and then increasing the ability for living quarters and making the current station a response station. So you would have those upfront costs. And then the transition and startup time is longer, because if you're going to send them for training, it's 54 weeks at the local community college is the paramedic program. So a little bit over a year for them to go from their current EMT through the full paramedic training. Yes, sir.
Based on your experience, is there any time when the revenue catches up or passes?
Not in a community your size. So if you're, so for example, your unit utilization rates, if I remember right from our last one, were about 8 or 9% for your EMS units. In order to be profitable, you'd have to get into those AMR and GMR models where it's 35, 40% utilization rate. And then, really have a robust payer mix. So in suburban communities doing fire-based EMS, you just don't see a profitable system. It's much like the fire department. There's a taxpayer cost to providing that service. What's beneficial to your community in this type, and what offsets that increased cost is now when your fire department arrives, that advanced care can start immediately. So if someone's having a heart attack, that rapid defibrillation, getting the IV started, getting the proper medications on board immediately while they're en route to the hospital, instead of having that delay of Sterling responding and your guys doing the basic care and then Sterling starting that advanced care later. So you have the more rapid advanced care beginning with the patient. So on those high acuity calls, it definitely pays big dividends quickly just by having that more timely ALS response. And then this one has a higher general fund impact annually than the per diem staffing model, but it wasn't so much higher that we thought the benefits weren't outweighed by, or didn't outweigh the costs. So when we looked at those three systems, your current impact on your general fund of your current EMS system between FY26, assuming it takes you that long to train and get up and running and getting everything done, would be about 2.71 million, and in FY29 about 2.962 million. If you went with the external service provider, add another 2.42 to 2.51 million to that. So you can see the external service provider is almost going to double the general fund impact of your EMS system. Using the per diem model, again, because they don't have benefits, they're a less expensive employee. And potential for lower hourly rates, depending if they're just paramedic trained or firefighter paramedics, but you're gonna set that rate. Puts them at impacting you, increasing your general fund impact by 236,000 to 255,000 over that 3-year period. And then using the full-time staffing model where you're bringing in firefighter paramedics goes from 680,000 to about 740,000 for the staffing. So you can see the per diem and the full-time, there's a few $100,000 difference, but we felt that the steady staffing model, the fact that you have career employees, the rapid intervention they could provide, and knowing the community, knowing the town, outweighed those increased costs for the full-time firefighter paramedic staffing. Yes, sir.
So for these numbers, that would be the total number from FY 26 to FY 29.
That would be each year, so there'd be a
Each
slight
year.
increase, yeah, annually. So in 26, it would be 680,000 increase, and then with raises and everything else projected using inflation factor, you get to $740,000 impact by FY 29.
Mr. Chair,
Sure.
just to follow up a question, because so it says current system delivery model impact 2.7 to 2.9 million. But I keep hearing people say that our current deal right now with Sterling is only costing us like $200,000 or $300,000 a year, or $150,000 a year. So I'm just trying to figure out.
So when we're looking at your current EMS model today, that's paying for the ambulance you staff.
Okay.
That's paying for the firefighter EMTs that staff that ambulance. That's paying for the supplies, everything that goes into running the current EMS system. What Sterling is you're paying them every time they show up for an advanced life support call, a certain amount, and then you guys are getting the reimbursement. If there's insurance reimbursement, Medicare reimbursement, or whatever happens, there's billing that happens that comes back to the town for that. So when you offset all those things, their cost of service against what you get reimbursed, it's only costing you about $100,000.
Okay, so it's because we get reimbursed. That's why. Okay.
On your full-time staffing, does that include the renovation costs?
No, we're going to go to those in a second.
So last question then. So then with the other options, do those also include, if we go full-time, we still have the ability or the opportunity to get reimbursed?
Yes, this is just your increased staffing costs.
Okay.
But when you're talking about the general fund impact, that's after you've collected revenues through the billing.
Okay, all right, thank you.
But so your current impact is about 2.7, and you go with a full-time firefighter paramedic, add 680 to that, that's going to be your new impact.
Okay,
So I think you just answered my
Yeah.
question. And so the current system, if we went to the full-time staffing model, it would be the current system delivery model impact plus the, okay, thank you.
Yeah, every one of those just add a plus. You always know when you did a bad slide when it made sense to you. It goes into the
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Well, like Mary Rose, I'm having a lot of trouble understanding how on the first, more or less the, third page or fourth page, approximately 2 million more in annual cost. This is the third-party ALS transport service. I can't figure out where that $2 million figure came from. If the internal service provider full-time staffing model
So
is going to be a cost change of $740,153. Where does that 1.3 million come from?
So in the report under that third party, it's all broken down into what those various costs would be and how they factored that. And if you need more detail, I've got a friend in Dallas Fort Worth that's the vice president of new systems for GMR. So I'm sure he can quickly give me a quick cost breakdown of even in more detail what something like that looks like. If that would be helpful for you guys.
It still doesn't tell me where we go from 740,000 to 2 million.
Yeah, so these are your employees operating out of the station you own, operating in an ambulance you own, using the same equipment and supplies are being used. up
There
here.
anyway.
This is a company coming into town.
Uh-huh.
They may operate out of a different building that you're paying part of. You're paying for their ambulance because they're not using your ambulance. You're paying for their equipment, their supplies, and their personnel because they're not part of your fire department.
So is the assumption in that $2 million that should we go with is it your assumption that should we go with a third-party system that we would drop our EMT program?
See,
And
these costs don't go away if you go there because of the issues of 2 in, 2 out. You're still going to need personnel to staff your engine company because currently your ambulance is staffed with firefighters also. They're firefighter EMTs,
Yeah.
so they can do both functions. If you went to the third party, you still have to have those folks to operate safely. So you're not going to be able to reduce your current fire department staffing. Think of it as all our 5-person minimum staffing is still needed. Today, they just show up in 2 different vehicles if the house is on fire. Take away your EMT model and replace it with a third-party EMS model. Now, all those people have to show up on the same fire. truck
Okay,
together.
good. All right, so your answer is, your assumption is that we would keep the EMT and firefighters, which I'm in favor
Because
of.
what you're gonna need is 1 person outside pumping the truck.
Yeah,
Then
yeah.
you're gonna have to have 2 on a hose
Listen,
line
we've heard that.
outside and 2
We
inside.
know that.
Okay. So,
We've heard it many times from the fire chief and the fire union.
well, now you know he's right.
I mean, I'm not debating whether it's
Nope.
right or not.
But
What I'm trying to get at is this $2 million figure.
yeah, so
Because
you
again.
don't get to
as
replace,
Said,
yeah, one doesn't go away. That's the problem. You're still gonna have those costs.
but we're presently providing the service through Sterling for $100,000.
Yeah, it's about the net.
I mean, if somebody if somebody at town meeting got up and asked Matt, the chairman, or the chairman here, why is I as a taxpayer, why would I prefer to pay $2 million for this service as opposed to 100,000?
We did not recommend that model.
We're not going with that one.
Huh?
We're not going with that one.
Well, no, but I'm saying, Matt,
I
what
would
if
tell them that we're not. I would tell them it's a bad idea.
It costs, to do it through Sterling costs us $100,000. To do it ourselves would cost $2 million.
No,
Why
No,
would we
that's
want
not
to,
correct.
why
sorry.
would we want to
That's
do
not
that?
we're not
correct.
going with the first one.
No.
We asked for options. We're not going with that option. They
would
recommended the
be-
third option. I don't want to spoil this. Sorry.
But,
They recommended the 4th option.
but here's.
Oh, you should say 3rd from the.
Yeah.
Here,
One
from the
plus
tax.
four.
I would argue against it. If someone spoke up at town meeting, I'd say it's a dumb idea.
What's that?
I'd say it's a dumb idea. It costs too much. The first option,
Per-
the 2.5. I'd say hiring a third
Third
party
party.
to do what we want to do here is a
Yes.
bad idea. It costs too much.
All right.
That's how I would answer that question.
That's not the question I'm asking.
That's the one you brought up about the hypothetical.
Well,
town
I'm
meeting.
just curious as to where the $2 million figure came.
We're not going.
We're
with
not
that.
going that way. It will
So
never be.
that figure is from a for-profit private ambulance company that looked at your response figures and the amount of reimbursement that, because you wouldn't get
Oh, I see.
reimbursed
Okay.
anyway. They
All
give you
right.
money.
Oh, still.
And they said, in order for us to do it, here's what it
All right,
costs.
okay. Very good.
Not the best option for you.
Yeah, okay.
So we recommended full-time internal fire department staffing model for ALS transport services. There were some one-time startup costs. So for each paramedic certification, if you were to send them to school, you're looking at about 2,600 a student. And if you were to train 12 of the existing personnel up to the paramedic level, about $31,000. You'll have about $48,000 in new equipment, and we split that over two fiscal years, 24,000 each year. And then if you were to choose the decision to up staff and need to renovate the stations, you'd be looking at about $900,000 to do the fire administration renovation and about $650,000 for the existing station renovation.
Excuse me. The school department was interested in using the old fire station for their administrative costs. And the cost of renovation then was 2 to 4 million.
Who's going to use it?
That
The
was,
school department.
I think that was, you would know better about this. This was for the STEM center.
To make it
Yeah.
into a makerspace, it was more of a, it wasn't just administrative stuff. It was like an engineering STEM makerspace.
With our for science, technology, so they would have, and they were, the equipment that goes into it, it wasn't just gonna be the superintendent's office, it was actually gonna be like an extended classroom that was
Science fair.
fully scientific.
I would say if you can renovate that previous fire station for 900,000, do it tomorrow. That's a pretty good price.
And that would be the administration aspect of it, yeah.
But that'd be one floor renovation,
Yeah, it's providing office space.
providing office space on one floor.
Does that quote include handicap accessibility improvements that would be needed at the building? Because I just remember from the point when we did discuss this, converting the old fire station into a STEM center for the school. I think that was the bulk of the cost was having to put in new stairs and an elevator to bring it up to code.
So our thought was the ground floor was going to be used for the offices.
Okay,
So in terms of public accessibility, it would be a handicap parking space would have to be available.
okay.
You gotta remember, they're not getting a lot of public foot traffic like a school would.
So I think that might be the disparity.
So they don't need to put in elevators and
I think
some of
that's
those
where
other-
the 2 to 4 million quote it came into play when we were talking about it before. So the only part of the old fire station we would utilize would be the first floor?
correct
Okay. And the second and third floor would just be,
storage or whatever they need it for.
Okay.
But it would be a public accessible area.
understood. Okay, all right.
But you still have to bring the second and third floor up to code.
Code for the use it's gonna have, which would be
Right.
storage, but not, so you don't need the various ingress and egress of people housing or living, up in that area like you would for a school. So if they're using that for classrooms, then you're gonna have to have elevators for handicap accessibility, and the amount of ingress and egress capability for however many students they were planning on putting in that building. So it's gonna be different for a 2 or 3 person work area compared to putting it together for a school.
Mr. Chairman, just to follow up on Bill's question there. When you came up with that figure of 900,000, was that anticipating that? Because, I mean, I guess I would probably refer to Michael. If you're doing any kind of substantial renovations and it's a town building, don't you have to make sure that all access to that is handicap accessible?
Yeah,
Yes.
the building would have to be, especially, it depends on how much renovation the cost would be, like you're doing more than, was it like about 30% of the building, then the whole building. But that first level is bay areas. This is gonna be upstairs, you still need to have handicap accessibility.
Yeah, anywhere where the public is going to have access would have to have the ADA requirements built in.
But the public would have to have access. I mean, I would assume people from the town could go into that building to make inquiries to,
On the first floor.
yeah.
But he's saying if we're not utilizing the second and third floors for public.
No,
use,
I understand that. I'm saying even if you're just using that where it's all bays now, obviously you're gonna make it accessible for offices and things of that nature. So you're putting in petitions and
Correct.
so, did you have someone design that came up with
We
the?
didn't, part of the scope was not a design. We had our facilities person just look into the larger scope of it, but obviously we're not an architectural firm, so I couldn't.
I think it would behoove us to do a deeper dive into that 900,000 and just get and find out, because I don't know the ins and outs of what handicap accessibility would have to be provided. And I think that would significantly change the cost. So, I mean, it's, you can take it as a guideline for now, but I think we should do a deeper dive. But to your point, that's not your expertise. You're just giving an estimate of what you think it may cost.
Well, that's what we're here for, to ask these questions. I mean, you know.
I agree with the question.
Yep.
So in terms of the implementation timeline, we're looking at about 30 months. So to get your ambulance licensed and certified as an advanced life support ambulance is going to take about 4 months, acquiring the equipment, doing job descriptions, and then you can go through the pay scale, hiring process, or training your existing personnel would take up to a year. Knowing that you're a smaller agency, it wouldn't be practical for you to try to send too many people to paramedic training at once. Most agencies your size would send 1 or 2 at a time, knowing that when they're in class, if it's on their off day, they're being paid overtime. If it's on their duty day, then somebody else is going to have to be backfilling their position if you're not able to meet minimum standings. So that takes a little bit of time if you're not hiring people that are already trained as firefighter paramedics and then putting them through your initial training program. And then the longest part of the timeline, obviously, those station renovations to get those complete.
Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
Just, I know that you've, in your opening about how long you've been doing this and for all the different states, how do you see it overall across the board, anticipating that you're able to hire, if you decide that you want to hire from the outside to bring the staffing in? How do you see that as far as availability of people out there that would?
So our research on the Massachusetts labor market is that the firefighter paramedic labor market is tight. You're obviously the easiest best bet for you is that the personnel currently staffing your ambulance all raise their hand and say, yeah, I'd love to get a 10% raise. I'll go to paramedic school, and you've got the talent in-house and they're able to pass the course, and you're not investing in new employees. You're using employees that used to be providing that basic care now in an advanced care level. Secondary to that is, being able to attract and hire personnel. In my experience as a former fire chief, I liked hiring paramedics because I knew they were smart enough to pass. If they were fit, agile, strong, they're going to pass fire school. There's not anything academically more challenging in fire school than they're going to have faced in paramedic school. So if they're able to do the physical components of the job, they're going to be fine. And it's typically a shorter training window. So you're not having to train people as much. So that was always our first approach. We'll hire we'll first run of the mill was, are you a firefighter paramedic? If so, great. Now we just have to train in our system. Second wave would be paramedic only. Next wave would be certified firefighter EMT that want to become a paramedic, and that's a condition of employment is to obtain paramedic within so much time frame of being hired. And then, the worst case scenario is you putting them through fire school and EMT school and paramedic school to get them fully certified. So
So didn't the study say they're giving you fire? There's not that interest.
we
Thoughts on that?
So we've been told by the chief and the union representatives that we've met with that today there hasn't been a lot of interest expressed, maybe 4 to 6 people that might be interested in doing it, but you don't know. So once it's in the contract and there's a new pay plan, and then maybe their position changes when they see that it's really coming. So you may have very little interest. There may be a lot of interest when understand you're going to bargaining fairly soon. So once it's known, that could change the interest levels. You know, how that changes, you know, their pay and what they're going to be doing. The reality is they're working on the ambulance today. They're just providing a basic level of care instead of an advanced level of care. So in order to move to that advanced level of care, it requires more training and different medical protocols for what they're able to do when they treat patients.
Quick question about their training. If you said that if you're sending 1 to 2 at a time, then if it was an off day, it would be overtime pay or they need backfill. Are those costs included in like the annual estimate or would that be in the certification?
It would be in
Portion.
addition. So because it's really going to depend on what that looks like.
Okay.
So it's hard to guess how many you're going to be sending versus hiring versus what that's going to look like.
Okay.
But you should just plan to budget for some additional overtime, knowing that if they're off duty and they exceed the FLSA mandates, you're going to have to pay overtime while they're attending school. And if they're on duty and minimum staffing levels aren't able to be met, somebody's going to have to backfill their position to meet minimum staffing.
Okay. So we should factor that into the budget.
To go back to the renovation of the old fire department. So Michael, any renovation that's done in that building, the whole building has to be brought up to code. Is that accurate?
So greater than 50% of the assessed value of the structure. Then in the building code, there's certain criteria, 25%, 50% thresholds, and then it's all basically done by the sign engineer.
So when on the projection of the 900,000, the idea would be that the current bays would be retrofitted for office space, and then upstairs would not be.
Yeah, we envisioned all public access to be on the first level to minimize the need for elevators or additional public access upstairs. The fire department can still use it for internal use. Obviously, to be a firefighter, you have to be able to climb stairs. So the accessibility in a fire station use is different than there is in a typical public building. But if your public access areas are all on the first floor, you're not facing the same issues. Whereas if public access areas are on second.
So if it was a situation where, say, the building inspector, fire inspector, they're located on the first floor of the old fire station, then it's given that there would be no access to the public on the second floor because there's no business to be conducted up there.
Correct.
And as long as it stays within that threshold of the percentage of the value of the building.
Mr. Chair,
Sure.
it's a question for you. So in your experience, are you aware of any towns that have decided to move forward with ALS, but then have to shut down because they couldn't hire the appropriate staff?
No, I've never heard that happening.
Okay, so it can be difficult. You said it's a tight, right, market, right? But
if you were going to have to hire 100% firefighter paramedics and you're trying to start it up immediately, it's the labor market is tighter. What happened after COVID is the ERs, emergency rooms in hospitals, started using a lot of paramedics as per diem staffing. So where firefighters, paramedics would do their off-duty work at another fire department, now the hospitals are paying larger hourly rates to come in there because they can start the IVs, they can start the EKGs, they can do all that, the same advanced care that the nurse can do, but they can bring them in per diem at a lower rate. So that tightened up paramedic labor market because they found a way to make reasonable off-duty money using the same skills, but in a climate controlled, comfortable setting of a hospital, making more money compared to being out, you know, in the snow, the rain, the hail, everything else.
But did that kind of come to an end when COVID came to an end?
Now, the hospitals are still using that model because they found it beneficial during COVID, cost effective. And so now you get the same issue that you had with nursing. You got to train more to fill this need in the labor market. So it's probably, I would say it's 2 years out from that labor force stabilizing, where they're able to train enough paramedics.
So you're saying that the firemen slash paramedics, hospitals are hiring them for their services and they're doing that in their off time as like their second job. And that's part of the reason why the pool of potential
Yeah, and
resources
we
is
we had a
limited.
number of studies for consolidation where fire departments wanted to consolidate with the EMS system and become a fire-based EMS. And so the hospital is running the EMS system, it's all part of the city, town, county funding system. And when you met with those hospital administrators, you know, unless you're gonna be able to save me this kind of money by me letting them go to the fire department, we are not even talking to you, because here's the benefit they bring to our hospital.
Right.
So they've realized the cost, benefit, the value of the paramedics in the hospital-based system.
This might be too specific of a question, but did you ever see where a town wanted to go with the fireman slash paramedic model, but they had trouble finding that unicorn, that perfect candidate? So then they said after a couple of years, then they were like, well, let's just hire paramedics separately. Or ultimately, were they able to find?
I don't know what led to it, but Huntington Beach, California is a unique model
Okay,
where their system is, they hire you as a paramedic.
Yeah.
And you work the ambulance for 5 years. If you aren't hired as a firefighter within that 5 years, then you're terminated. So your first 5 years, we try you before we buy you as a paramedic. If you don't gain full-time employment, then we let you go after that 5-year window. So that's a model they found useful for their community. But
so is it fair to say that the model of just hiring the paramedics as opposed to training a fireman or having a resource that's a fireman and a paramedic combined, that the model of just hiring a paramedic is very minor, is kind of like the exception rather than the rule?
yeah, the reason I don't recommend that for you guys is because of the cost.
Yeah,
So you're bringing in a paramedic, which is gonna have a similar cost to a firefighter.
right.
And now you still need the 5 people to show up for the fire.
I get it. I'm just looking at it from the difficulty of hiring a fireman and a paramedic. Is that something like in your experience, hey, it's difficult, but in a couple of years, you should be able to do it. It's just not something you can turn on and hire someone immediately.
What I've been hearing across country is it's improving.
Okay,
It's not as bad as it was. It's slowly improving, but like I said, it's probably 2 years before it's back to where it was. I know when I was getting on the fire department, for every opening, there was 100+ people standing in line waiting to try to take the test and get the job. You go to the big metro cities and it might be 500 people. Then all of a sudden you're seeing 25 people are showing up and 10 of them have automatic disqualifiers because they've done drugs or they've got a felony conviction or something, you know, precludes them, and those go away.
Right.
And then 10 don't even show up when you're giving the test, and now you're down to 5, and half of those pass the test. So now you're down to 2 or 3, you know, so.
I guess for perspective, just the difficulty of hiring a fireman slash paramedic, obstacle, yes, deal breaker, no. Like if we
Not a
decide,
deal breaker, in my opinion.
okay, thank you.
I have another question for you. So to Mr. Jakonski's point, if you could kind of give some insight on to anybody who's questioning if we're currently spending $125,000 a year utilizing surrounding community ALS, why would we consider spending an extra $500,000 to have our own ALS internally?
I think there's 2 real drivers to that. One is Sterling as well as Clinton are both experiencing increases in call demand for emergency medical services. So having you as a customer is putting a strain on their system, which once their 2 units are committed, they don't have a unit to send to you. So now you're relying on units further out. So the second thing and where you improve that is when you have that fire-based ALS transport. Now you're going to have a paramedic on the fire truck, because remember, it's the relief for your ambulance too. You're going to have a paramedic on that ambulance, and it doesn't matter which unit gets there first. That advanced level of care can start immediately. So if you're in cardiac arrest and you get the instant defibrillation, if you need the pacemaker component put on because you're in atrial fibrillation, they can do that. If you're having a diabetic emergency, they can give you the appropriate medication. So that advanced care, which is so critical in the first 8 minutes, now shows up with your clinical responding units, where it's waiting 10 minutes, or if Sterling's not available, longer for someone else to get there, because your current personnel are limited to providing that basic level of care that's authorized by the state for EMTs.
Chief, do you have a ballpark on what the response time is right now for Sterling or any surrounding town?
We're an average response of about 4 minutes anywhere. You usually get there roughly 4, 5 is probably stretching into the outskirts. You gotta add 6, 7. I'd say under 10 minutes. It's time.
In how critical is response time to the success of tending to a patient or the patient's health or well-being?
So 8 minutes is the national standard for initiation of advanced care. So and you got to remember, and when we're talking about this time continuum, someone in the room has a heart attack, someone here has to dial. Dispatch center has to answer that call. If nobody here knows how to do CPR, nothing's happening, right? They have to answer the call. They've got to get the address, what the information. Then they dispatch the fire units. The gold standard for the fire department being notified, getting up, getting their gear on, getting in the truck and getting moving is 80 seconds, 90% of the time. Most departments are closer to 90-second turnaround time. And then you got the travel time component. And that's the time and distance. What are the roads? What's the weather? If the fire station's there and we're here, it's quick. If it's the other side of town, it takes a little longer. So the same thing happens with Sterling. You guys get notified of the call, your units are responding. Now there's the notification of Sterling, and then their units have to get en route, and they have to go around. If Sterling says we're not available, then it's going to the next responding jurisdiction to get them en route, but you still have that 90 seconds, call processing still has to happen, the 90-second turnaround time, and then the drive wherever it is. It's just that benefit of having it that level of care. Even if your ambulance is transporting the hospital, there's still going to be a paramedic on that engine company. That's why we factored in the double cost. ALS equipment, so that now it's an ALS engine, and if your ambulance is supposed to do that advanced life support care, start immediately while you're waiting for that next unit. And even if a basic life support unit happened to arrive, the paramedic can ride with that.
So I mean,
Do you have more?
just by shaving off the 4 or 5 minutes that it takes currently for an asset to come here from Sterling, we'd be increasing the quality of the ALS care, because with ALS care comes the quicker you can get to the patient, the better the chance, the survival rate. So, it's an increase in cost, but you're getting an increase in your ALS, the care that you're getting, so we can get there quicker.
Yeah, and it's really only critical for those higher acuity calls. Right? So Johnny trips on the soccer field and twists his ankles, and they call the ambulance because they don't know if his ankle's broken. It really doesn't matter what your medical cares are all trained to split, put them on the dot, take them to the hospital, and let the X-ray figure out if it's broken, right? So, but when you're dealing with strokes, heart attacks, serious trauma, diabetic emergencies, and the things that require the more acute care, that's when it makes a difference.
Okay, and just to refresh my memory, Sterling not only supports Sterling, but we can call them, but they support other communities as well, correct? Yeah. And so if Sterling is unavailable, then we call Bolton. Is that okay? So we call Sterling, see if they're available. If they are, they come. If they're not available, then there's the next just kind of tick down the line until someone becomes available, correct? Sorry, I had another question too. I can't remember, but I'll think about it.
What percentage, do you know or have a ballpark on the percentage of communities in Massachusetts that are ALS based versus BLS?
I do not, but I can do that research and send it to Mike.
Okay.
I can get it to Mike.
Okay, and I remember my question again. I think, and Chief, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think when this started, when the need arose to have like advanced life support, I believe you said that there was like kind of a short number of things that you were like required to call on. And as the years have progressed, the list from the state has grown. So say, I'm just throwing it hypothetically, like say there were 4 reasons why you need to call advanced life support. Now there might be 10 or something, 15 or something. Okay. So it was like a kind of a minimal need, not minimal, like it was a serious call, but minimal times, but I guess, expansion of the needed.
Yeah, the level of care provided pre-hospital.
Yes, thank you.
Has grown over the years. So it used to be that
Yeah, it's like stroke.
paramedic,
How-
what I was able to do is far less than what the new paramedics are able to do. So much like everything else in the fire service, they raise their hand and they're willing to do what's needed to be done to get the job done, whether it's taking on hazmat or emergency management or emergency medicine or whatever it is. And at first you had physicians, because these paramedics work under a physician license. So the physician authorizes the protocols. Here's what you're allowed to do without calling me. And here's what you have to get a physician's approval to do. So you got the standard care as well as the more advanced care when you've got to call in where a physician goes, yeah, that checks all those boxes, do that. But as they become more comfortable with the level of pre-hospital care going on, they've gotten more comfortable with expanding the level of services that are provided. So you can almost think of the ALS ambulance as a mini emergency room on wheels. Can't do everything, but boy, it can do a lot of what goes on in the emergency room to get that care started, so that when you roll into the hospital, you're able to go to the cath lab and get that done in the first 60 minutes. So it speeds up even the care once you arrive at the hospital, because the IVs are started, the airways are established, everything that's needed has already been taken care of pre-hospital. So the hospital doesn't have to do those steps before they can prepare them for the higher level care that obviously the hospitals are needed to provide.
So the active people that are actually, the paramedic diagnosis, one which go right straight to the that's what saves their life. They don't, like he said, they don't have to stop, get an IV, get the medication, get everything going. Then identify, see right on the street, and then they go right past them. So kind of emergency rooms are clogged right now, extreme, just taking them out of the stream.
And when the cath lab is what?
Right, you meant.
Blockages, bleeding. And it's like you said, it's within 60 minutes. Dead.
So with ALS, because that process starts sooner, by the time they get to the emergency room, they're able to get right into that service versus
So
right
emergency,
now-
Go to the emergency.
versus right now, they get to the hospital.
Have to get diagnosed.
Right.
and then-
If we don't have ALS, if we have ALS, somebody comes, we go right to the gap.
I think everybody is convinced that the ALS is a better system, better quality. I think what we want to do is to get a number of what it's going to cost and have confidence in that number, and then decide if we can afford that number. I don't think anybody's questioning that the full staffing is a better quality. It's just, can we afford it? Do we have a number that we have confidence in?
Well, and I just want to ask this question so that later on I can say I told you so. When you say that it's possible, difficult, but certainly not impossible, to get a combination ALS and firefighters hired. Are you saying that with knowledge of the foibles of the Massachusetts civil service system?
Well, that's where you're bargaining with the firefighters coming.
Well, the
into play.
firefighters are committed to the civil service center,
Correct.
to the civil service system. So, I mean, I'm asking you, when
But
you
it's
say
not- It's not uncommon in Massachusetts for fire-based EMS to be paramedic level care.
okay,
Mr. Chairman, I just kind of wanted to follow up just on Mike, because I've been sitting here thinking about it, that I know from the perspective of the Clinton Fire Department, it's all relatively young people. I would say maybe, Mike, in the next 5 years, you'd probably have 3 retirement age,
No,
more,
less.
less, okay. So as a follow-up question on that, we're talking about within the next 30 months, possibly 12 additional people in the department. ALS.
I wouldn't think you'd need the 12 additional. I think you're gonna you're gonna train some existing.
But let's just say that there isn't anybody in the department that's interested. I know,
So
I know originally the meeting we had back a while ago, Mike, you said maybe
thought
one
it
or
was
2
4
were, and I mean, I know one of them sat right here that's high ranking in the department, said, I have no interest because I have young children. And I know it's a big commitment, I do, and I will agree with Bill, I think it's obviously for the population of Clinton, obviously it would be better for the people. I don't think anyone is disputing that, certainly not myself, but it's just, again, from the financial standpoint, I'm trying to think of how do you work it out that you're trying to get those people in, let's just say 4. And there's no one, so you've got to hire from the outside and you're still maintaining the 25 people. So now you're not 25 anymore, you're 29.
Yeah, you're
So you've got 25 people who are EMTs, and then you've got 4 paramedics. I mean, we could possibly wind up with that scenario.
you could, and that's where
And is that
Yeah,
would
you
you
determine-
anticipate that some,
you determine, again, level of care. So this is part of the authority having a connection with the elected officials determine that level of care. And it could be that you make the decision if there's only 4 that you can do that tiered response. If we have a paramedic on duty, we upgrade to ALS care that day. And ALS is provided here. But on days that we don't have ALS available, we're again relying on Sterling or Bolton. Or
so you could see
or
that
you make the
scenario.
decision saying, we're gonna upstaff the fire department by 2 because we understand in order for us to have a fairly reliable, we know somebody's gonna be off it. And now we can't have an ALS engine company all the time and an ALS ambulance, but we can have one or the other most days. So we're gonna upstaff the fire department by 2 personnel to get to 6. Because we've got 4 in-house that want to go to training. It's gonna take 2 more to get us there. So then you upstaff 2 shifts by 1 person. So you've got a paramedic on the engine, a paramedic on your ambulance. And if somebody's off, they're able to move over and backfill to make sure that ambulance is staffed. Now, on the off chance that paramedic A is on vacation, paramedic B calls in sick, then you have to have a staffing decision of do we call in overtime to backfill the paramedic to ensure that there's constant minimum staffing of 1 paramedic per day, or are we going to that tiered response of now we're gonna drop down to BLS care today because we don't have a paramedic to staff either unit, and on those more rare occasions we'd rely on Sterling and Bolton. So the staffing model is there. Ideal. The Bolton staffing model, you get 12 personnel that are trained. You're fully functional. Somebody being off on vacation, somebody else being off sick, impact. You still got paramedics on both units, and everything's working perfect. So any other scenario is scalable. It just depends on what kind of staffing policy fire department's gonna put in place for how do we operate under A, B, C, and D scenarios.
So in the situation you just referred to, if the town was to transition to ALS and the challenges of hiring paramedics or getting paramedics trained, the town does still have the option to utilize whatever paramedics they have on staff and then continue to utilize Sterling or Bolton on an as needed basis until we get the staffing we need.
So it really becomes something more similar to what you guys do in the event of a larger fire. Your 5 people show up on scene of anyone who's downtown building. That's not an effective response force to mitigate that level of fires. Sterling's coming, Bolton's coming, and some other surrounding communities are coming to assist in that type of emergency. Same type of an event, you have to have that in place for your EMS system. So, the system strain out Sterling, and what you've done is now you haven't eliminated, but you alleviated some of that system strain.
Mr. Chair, so I think everyone, to Finance Committee's point too, I think everyone agrees ALS is, it's a service that can literally save lives. So I guess what I'm struggling with is, I don't know how I could look a community member or taxpayer in the face and say, well, we have this available service that could save people's lives, but sorry, it's too expensive. So we're not going to change it. And I know we have to get costs, but some of the costs that have been up here in this presentation, I'm seeing like $500,000, $600,000. I mean, we approve $100,000 to decorate High Street. We approved $300,000 for a salary increase a couple years ago with like kind of minimal discussion. So I guess I don't disagree that we need numbers, but I think that we can get those numbers. I don't think we can get quotes. Like we can figure out, everything's a projection, right? So if we want to know what the cost is going to be 5 years out, I mean, who knows? But you can know with some degree of certainty the first couple of years, and then as you go further out, it's like anything else in life. You can't predict anything. So I'm kind of, that's why I know, like Mike said, what if somebody asked the question, why should I pay more money? I'm looking at it the other way. Like if someone comes up to me and is like, my grandfather died, and if you guys had this service, they would have got here 3 minutes earlier and he might have been saved. Like, what are you guys doing trying to, I mean, I just don't think this is the thing to like nickel and dime. This is like a pretty important, serious thing. So I want to get a cost, but I'm a little confused at some of the pushback to this, because it seems like very beneficial and within a reasonable cost, relatively speaking.
There's also, the opportunity if you guys are looking when the chief meets with his personnel and gives our direction to the town and that you can move forward exploring a hybrid of staffing with your full-time people and getting trained, and we're just going to use the per diem folks to kind of fill in as needed and not be the integral staffing piece, but more available on an on-call basis versus continual reliance on them being available 12 hours so many times a month.
Mr. McGrail, so just going back to what you had mentioned, so you had mentioned that the confidence in the numbers. So are you suggesting we look further into the numbers, or I would like to try to understand what you're.
Like the Supreme Court says of pornography, you'll know it when you see it. So if you're confident with the numbers that are presented here, go with it. If you're not, ask more questions.
And I think that's ultimately when we move forward with doing the study, the idea was that the numbers we were going to get were from a professional within the field that has large expertise. So the numbers that were provided would be an accurate projection. So what I would like to make sure is that before the consultant leaves today, that everybody's had an opportunity to ask any questions they have on those figures, because I don't want to see a further discussion of, well, let's look further into this, and then we continue down this path again of trying to dive deeper into numbers that ultimately they're only and always going to be a projection. And I understand on like the renovation of the fire station, I completely get that. But as far as the operating costs or the costs of it to the taxpayers in Clinton, these numbers are based on all the data and research, as you had mentioned in the beginning. So I don't know that.
And just full transparency, our firm prides itself on being available after the report. So I don't have a little timer that I'm going to start. The chief's struggling with some part of implementation. We're available, and anything that we've recommended that he needs guidance on, or the town needs guidance on, as you move forward with any one of these different options for implementation, we're available to you. And that's part of the cost of the original study. So we're not a firm that comes after you for hourly stuff after hourly stuff. We want to make sure that if we recommended it, that we provide any assistance you need in getting it implemented too.
Are we saying that right now, that we don't believe these numbers that are in this?
No, I
No,
just wanted
looking for
clarification,
clarity.
that's all.
Okay.
I think Paul had something to say.
I'm following up on what Bill's saying and what you're saying. Is that you have a timeline? Okay, the timeline, can you give us dollars and cents for the timeline for the first to 12 and then 12 for the next 24?
Yeah, it's all in the report. It shows fiscal year impact, capital, and operational each year for every option.
Not in this report, then, the other report.
Yeah, the whole report.
So if I look at it, I can see what my cost is for the first 12 months.
Correct.
Okay.
You can look at what we projected for FY
Didn't come in the
25,
email.
26.
And include all these items that you have on here. All right. Now, my second question is that we can go ahead and approve anything and say it's gonna work, but if we don't have someone that agrees with its ladies all on residents, then we could be in trouble. So I have a question later on, does the chief go along with what we're saying here so we can get this thing going? Or are we gonna be voting something to force him into doing something that he really doesn't have confidence in? Do you have a chat with him and see if he agrees with what you have here? Or?
The issue again is, again, the numbers are all estimated. We are still in negotiations. We still have a negotiated base schedule. So we didn't sit here and say that 1, 2, 3, or 4. I can't answer that.
So at the town meeting, when someone comes up and say, what's it gonna cost us in your budget for the first 12 months? What do we tell them? We don't know. So you have confidence in what, that's the only thing I'm saying. Okay, you have confidence that it's gonna go, you're gonna be leading this. Okay.
Yeah, I think we did kind of like explore that. We did ask the question, has the difficulties in hiring the fireman/paramedic resource, has it ever forced a town in your experience to abandon the initiative because they couldn't hire anyone?
No.
And no, right? So I mean, we're not saying that it's easy. We understand that it's going to be difficult. The perfect solution, and I hope that firemen on Clinton's staff right now would help us out, and people that are available would pursue that, because that would be the easiest option. But if we have to go a different route, it'll be difficult, but ultimately, I mean, I think this is an important enough initiative that we should, just because it's difficult doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it.
So the budget's gonna be presented, when we approve it, is gonna include 1 through 12, which is in the report. Is that what we're saying? In other words, when you present your budget and we go ahead and say, I approve it, it goes along with what he's saying, or do we want to doctor it up? So
As far as the numbers, I have my budget plan. Like I said, we're still in negotiations. I can't give back the numbers. Those numbers.
Well, we have to start guessing. I know that, Mike, but like, we can't just say we can't supply any number. Like, we have to do our best. Everything is a projection. Everything is a budgetary estimate. Like, we can't, just because there's a lot of uncertainty in the numbers, that doesn't mean that we just can't supply any numbers. So we do have to supply the information. And I think anyone reasonable, no one's gonna crucify you if something weird happens in the next year and totally blows those numbers out of the water. I mean, they're gonna understand, you're only making the best projection that you can at that time. but like, we do have to make those projections.
And Chief provided it a couple of years ago. It was the the firefighter's salary plus 15% or 12%. So that was his projection. So he has provided numbers in the past. And the request was to get numbers that were, to dig a little bit deeper and get more numbers, which we
Which
got.
is this.
But the numbers he provided include all these items that are listed here.
Say that one more time.
The numbers that he provided 2 years ago include all these items that are presented here.
Chief Lutz provided a very thorough projection of what he anticipated the transition to ALS to cost the town. I think the point of contention was there were members that were requesting an implementation plan. And that's what also segued into this. So there was, some of it was numbers, but there was a request for, we wanted guidance on implementing ALS. And so that's what we have in front of us.
And in your, for budgeting purposes for next fiscal year, so as you're doing that planning, if you looked at the things that can realistically happen would be someone raises their hand and says, I'm willing to go to paramedic school. They get them registered. It's going to take a year. So you're fast forwarding to the next fiscal year to where now you've got 4 people that are interested going to school, whatever the numbers wind up being, right? And you budget appropriate overtime, knowing that you're going to have to do more backfilling than normal. All these people are in school to maintain minimum staffing. So if those 2 things happened for the next budget year, then you've started the implementation. And in FY26, you can start looking at, okay, now that we're going to have these folks come out of school, we need to make sure they have defibrillators and the tools they need to do the job, get that ambulance certified. And while they're in school, you can be doing that paperwork and everything else to get the unit certified as advanced life support, getting the equipment purchased. And then when they're out of school, that part of the system is slowly up and running. You don't necessarily have to rush the full implementation. If you wanted to start the process now, it's training and money for overtime while these personnel are going to training, knowing you're back in another budget discussion before they're done.
Are you gonna call for a vote tonight?
No,
Okay.
no. I mean, I think the numbers provided and the concepts provided in the study are quite detailed and should be adequate for us to make a decision. Anybody looking for that sort of statement? I mean, I think that these things are adequate. I don't think we can make a decision tonight. We have to, well, first of all, you guys we have to decide separately and then come together. My only concern is not, I would not argue that we should not spend the money, talking about what Ed was talking about. I also agree that people's lives are worth something up and above fiscal considerations. On the other hand, I don't think we should enter into something that's going to be a fiscal boondoggle, which I think is possible in this project. But I think that basically what's in this study that you sent us is adequate for us to make a decision.
Mr. Chair. Sure. What about the capital cost? Because frankly, that gave me pause. How big would that number have to be maybe we'd have to get a sharper point on both, I think, but that would require some kind of study, I imagine.
I don't
as far as
believe that
renovation?
$900,000 figure for anybody who's interested. I think it's going to be more than that.
So we're not going to know that for a while.
Yeah.
I would guess. Best case.
But if we're phasing in the project, then we don't need a renovated building to begin the project.
Correct.
Did you know what I mean?
Oh, I do, but
Yeah.
we don't want to keep the materials the whole time either.
What's that?
We don't want the materials the whole time either. The idea was to
Modulars.
Sorry, modulars, fancy trailers. I mean, I just want there to be an end point there.
Yeah,
that we
yeah.
Keep pushing off and, you know, is that double? I imagine, I'd probably say double. Say 3. Like, I don't think the 9's really, and I don't know what it takes to get, I don't know, that one,
But I mean, I don't think that should hold up going forward.
Ah.
That we need more information on the renovations. And I think it's gonna be more than 900,000, but I think we have enough information to move forward, to take it under consideration and begin to,
So,
move forward.
so the 900,000, is that gonna be in fiscal 25 budget, or
No.
is it gonna be?
I can't imagine it is. We don't-
Under the capital. And my one question, is there ARPA funds available for renovations?
not that heavy.
I was gonna
I
say,
mean, quite a bit of ARPA funds not expended, not committed, right?
Yeah, I think between the assistant town administrator and the town administrator, I'm sure that there's ways that ARPA could be utilized in some fashion. But I agree, as you know, if to the consultant's point, if the training itself is going to take us into FY26, so that might be something that's FY27, but at least in the temporary, if there's anything we can do to utilize our funds to offset costs, and then whatever the fashion is, regardless if it's housing or not, they're. we're
It's
open to it.
eligible under.
Because we have until this
Yes.
December.
December 31st, yeah.
in contract, whatever we're purchasing.
We spend it.
Okay.
Understood.
It can't just be allocated, it has to be spent.
Right.
Well, I mean, 300,000 reserved for the Strand that right now is just sitting there. So if nobody starts making a move on that, if there's 300,000 right there, that's like.
Things there, when we discuss is the equipment to get it all in, and obviously the flight, so, and whatever it was, it had gone up, 630. We look at that subject to getting.
Mr. Chair, about getting the program off the ground. If we whiff in that first year and don't get anybody to sign up, when does the clock start? Does it start when does the clock start as far as like we got to get it done in 3 years?
Paramedics on your payroll and ALS, change your service, BLS, ALS.
So we have some trained. Someone trained, not just hired.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say that when your first person is trained, you flip the switch, because what that's gonna look like to your town is at best every third day,
Yeah.
we operate an ALS system. So you want more than one person at the ALS level. So it's, you're rolling out a new system, but here's our operational plan if it can't be staffed that day. But you wouldn't want the norm to be it's not able to be staffed that day. So
So if we sign up for it in June, the clock doesn't start until we have staff available for us to flip the switch. Thank you.
It's going to be standard. It's only the national regulators. That's how it's rated. So as we, once the clock is set, and you're operating in that ALS level, cumulatively, you have to do 8 hours per day. Fulton did something a little different. I think they did like 12. Just that way, if you miss the day, you're still cumulative. And once you get to year 3, you have to turn around and be 24/7. You need the people that back you up is your Sterlings. So in those days that something gets missed, somebody to cover it. Fulton, West Boylston, Sterling, Leominster. And that has to be agreement saying that you're backwards.
I agree with Mr. Jakonski that, the information we have here, we can review and then come to a decision at a later meeting. My request or preference would be that everything we've done with ALS has been in a joint fashion to this point, and that when that discussion happens, I would like the opportunity to be in the room when the finance committee discusses it as well. To kind of go back, to be able to have a collaborative and a collective discussion. But
I was told that the ALS cannot be a separate part of the fire department's budget. It has to be adjoined, and so why can't it be, why can't it have a separate section for ALS? Like some of the other, the ambulance department and something else.
So the enterprise.
I think you meant discussion.
Well, they all run through the enterprise account, I would think.
I was just referring to the discussion. Mr. Jakonski had mentioned that having finance committee decide, have a discussion and decide, and then have the select board have a discussion and decide, and then come back together. That's all I was referring to, was having that be joined.
Makes sense to do it together.
I mean, I would say, quite frankly, the next step is for the Board of Selectmen, separate from us, to look at the data and say, okay, we are going to go forward. Either we're not going forward, or, as I think is more reasonable, we are going forward, and these are the actions we are going to take the first year, and this is what's going to cost. And then, it's up to us to say, well, can we afford it? Is it financially sensible? I mean, that's our role. But, at some point in time, somebody's going to say, okay, this next year we are going to hire 2 ALS people, 3 ALS people, get one person interested in, et cetera, and begin that process of building the system. That's what I would say should happen next. And in the meantime, I mean, the finance committee will be talking about all sorts of budget things, this included. And we'll sort of digest in more detail the full report that this gentleman supplied to us, and then proceed from there. I mean, I think we said last year, we need a feasibility study, we need some numbers. Well, I think we have that. I mean, people may disagree with me, but I think we
Mr.
do.
Chairman,
Sure.
Just to, I agree with you 100%, Mike. I think that's how the procedure should go. But I have a question for Mike. Is there any, I should say, Chief, is there any mechanism that you have to contact anyone about potential availability for ALS people who already have the certification that would be interested? Is there any mechanism out there for you?
I'm just trying to understand the
Well,
question.
let's just say, right, well, that's what I'm saying. Like, I know we've had future discussions about how many certified within the state, 351 communities throughout the state, positions as well. So all I'm saying, is there any kind of mechanism that you could get any kind of a potential outlook? If in fact the town said, yeah, this is what we want to do, we want to implement it. Let's just say Clinton wants to see if we can secure in the next 12 months, 2 people. Fully qualified. Is there any kind of a mechanism for you to be able to make that projection that you think it can happen?
People, they establish themselves.
Uh-huh.
So at that point, once that list is established, I can go on that list and see how many paramedics. Can I reach out to them? Can't answer that. But I can see what's on the list. At one point, I think it was 300 something. It was last time. It was not gonna say it was in 200. So April 1st, we'll have a better idea what's on that list. Obviously, I have 2 firefighters that just got out of the academy 26th of February. They're young, so, so for me to say who's interested in the night, really. Yeah.
Well, I think that's probably a good thing to do. I think that would give you more of a target. That's just my thought on it.
Well, and I agree with you, and that was part of the discussion that we had last September when we discussed prioritizing the aspect of, the negotiation. Because as Chief has mentioned, based upon there not being any numbers, it's gonna be hard for, I mean, you're gonna say, yeah, I would be interested. And then whatever that number turns out to be, they may be definitely interested or they may be not interested at all. So that was, you know, I was told we're putting the cart before the horse. It's kind of where.
So all right, I'm just trying to see where we're headed on this because I'm just kind of looking back at the last like couple years. So the fire chief kind of gave his pitch and the finance committee just didn't totally, they thought there was information missing. They wanted more information. Their prerogative. I get that. We agreed. We hired a consultant, an expert in the field, went out and got the numbers, put the numbers together, is presenting them here. Everyone agrees that we have the information to make a decision. So I'm trying to figure out what, Mike, when you say that you want the select board to go back and present more numbers to you or to like, I'm trying to just figure out like what projected costs are missing from this report. Specifically, like, I'm not saying that, it's not intended to be antagonistic. I'm trying to just.
There's no numbers missing. There is a organizational structure and organizational plan missing. So if I was on the Board of Selectmen, I would say, okay, our next deal is to say, in cooperation with the chief, this is what we want the program to look like at the end of next fiscal year. We want X number of ALS people. It looks like all of them will probably have to be from outside. We want to get this many people lined up for training, find out and get some. We want to have a program designed for what training program are you going to offer these firefighters? You know what I mean?
I know, but
so all of that stuff, and then put a price tag on it.
But we all had the opportunity when we were looking at hiring a consultant to explain exactly what information we wanted. So if a more detailed organizational structure was a criteria for what you wanted, I don't understand why we all had the opportunity to say what we wanted to get out of the study. So to get this study presented and just say, well, that's nice, but it's missing the organizational structure. Well, why wasn't that included as something that we wanted discussed in this report? So that's what it's like every time we get to a point where we think we have supplied you with the information that you want, it's always this like next step of like something else that we have to do. And I don't have a problem doing it. If it means that if we
okay, Ed, do this. Shazam! There is now an ALS. There is now Shazam! It's in existence. Do that. Do that instead of what I suggested. See how it works out for you.
Can I make a suggestion?
I'm not trying to I am trying to get everybody to agree. I'm not trying to put roadblocks.
Well, no, it's
This is
another.
just basic
but now
management.
you're putting the ball back in our court again. So now, like we get together with Mike, possibly with the consultant again, and try to figure out how the organizational structure is going to work. I didn't know that was. I thought when this report was presented that all the information that we thought we needed to make a decision was going to be available, and now it just doesn't seem like that's the case. Fine. All I'm asking is if you've answered the question. So you want an organizational structure to go along with some of the cost estimates. Well, that's what we have to do. Then.
Chairman, I just think my interpretation of what Mike is saying is that he would like to see the board sit with the chief and come up with what his suggestion for the staffing would be.
What's the next
and how would
We
you
could
implement
have
it?
done that 6 months ago.
But, well, they didn't have the information that this study brought us today that we're discussing. What the full staffing would look like, how it goes price-wise as you phase it in. I think that was what everyone was looking for and what was agreed. Is that what you feel you got tonight? From the finance, is that what you feel?
Mr. Chairman, our chairperson is absent tonight. I was late for a meeting and elected vice chair. We will have an answer for you on Thursday, April 11th. We either approve or disapprove based on the figures we have now.
And again, if
So-
there's any
Hold on a second.
information you need, so if an
Hold on a
organizational
second.
chart structure is needed,
That's exactly
We
what,
can-
so,
Well,
right.
I was,
So
I can have
do
that
we
prepared.
do we need an organizational structure for finance committee or not? Because first Mike said we do, now you're saying that you're gonna move ahead and make a decision without, one. So I'm just
Official cut
asking
bid
what-
at some point.
I'm wondering if the crux of this is the desire to have like, in fiscal year 2025, it will cost this much. In fiscal year 2026, I don't think we can go out too much farther from it, but is that the desire? Is that what you're looking for?
would it be helpful?
I think
if
it's
we-
incumbent on the Board of Selectmen to tell us how much money they want for next year for the ALS study. I don't think it's that we should be telling the Board of Selectmen what
Yeah,
they should
so,
spend.
so you're saying
I'm trying.
how
to
much
give
it will
them
cost
how-
next year, based on what we want to do? Okay, I'm just asking.
Yeah, yeah.
So if it would be helpful, we could do a hypothetical. So if you were to overstaff the fire department by authority, you hire 3 outside firefighter paramedics. Now you've got staffing to be able to send 3 internal to school without it impacting your staffing model, right? Now you've upstaffed to allow these folks to go to school. Here's what it's gonna cost you in the new staffing for that first year, plus the tuition, plus the potential overtime that may come out of it. And then year 2, now you're gonna be up and running. Here's what you need to budget for the equipment, the supplies, and the different steps you need to make sure that you achieve in that second year. So in that scenario, I would recommend you hire the 3, they're outside folks coming in, have to train them to the system and all this. So while those other folks are going to paramedic school, they're doing the internal training, and not until your existing personnel come out of school, we start the clock. So I'm not sure exactly when the next semester starts at the college, but whenever that happens, would be a year from then when they begin to finish. And then you would have your 6, and we'd show you what your new org chart looks like based on adding those 3 and these 3 coming out, and give you the cost for that scenario.
That would be excellent.
Does the board think that we would still want to include the services of the Matrix Consulting Group to put this organizational, it's included in it?
Anything that comes out of the recommendation.
Okay.
this arose out of the recommendation, we will do free,
Okay, so.
unless you want to pay for it.
Okay, so we just need to schedule.
We are gonna have to do this on our own. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So we'll just schedule a meeting and do it offline with the fire chief and with the consultant. We'll put together a organizational structure for.
I'll get it revised. It's got that first 2-year, here's hiring 3 outsiders,
Yeah.
here's the equipment you need to purchase, lay it all out, here's your budget for 25, here's your budget for 6.
That'd be excellent.
We want to use the 10% pay or the 15% that you use. His projections, one will hire just.
I guess I would rather go higher than,
Yeah.
I'd rather overcorrect.
Yeah.
So we'll use that.
Come in low.
Could I just ask on a timeline, like what you would think would be in? And
Fair
we
enough.
meet Wednesday next week.
Wednesday.
So, all right, yeah, that'd be awesome.
Perfect.
Also, Mr. Chairman,
Sure.
just, Chief, do you think you could have something too for, like, from the civil service and
Yeah.
go back
That
through them?
and get the numbers, I can sit, look at the numbers. And in the meantime, see if any of my guys are interested.
Or the civil service?
Yeah.
Like I said, listen to them, just that.
So we'll put the range there of 10-15%.
Because the student year one, 12, 13. Yes, 12. So you're in that 12, 13. Paramedics and mercenaries. That's what they had, mercenaries. And just, this is.
That's how we get hired.
And the situation is that, no. Paramedics by themselves, mercenaries. What I mean by that is, will leave 50 cents. So but it's different when you're talking about firefighters, because they also enjoy the fire job. So it's not as bad. But the situation to Johnston in here, he basically said to me, he says, in order to get them to stay, and that's always been the same. It's the only reason I set out at 50% was thinking in my brain that if we pay them and we incentivize them to stay, we're going to keep them. Whereas firefighters in EMTs, may have hired, I don't even know, I hired 4, I lost 4, 3, I lost 2. So it's for 6 years, that's all I've done, is hired for 6 years. It's still not.
Very good. Are there any other questions? We greatly appreciate you coming out and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you. Do we want to jump right into? Take a yes. All right, so Chief, if you want to come up and begin your presentation for your budget.
We'll start right over the fire department budget. So as far as the salaries go, you know, they're still in contract negotiations, but I know, you know, the way the percentages are, so they're included in there. That's not, so the fiscal year that we're in now, we're still in contract negotiations, so that's all retroactive from July 1. Again, that's all calculated into the salaries. Going right straight down. Overtime, I mean, right now, overtime, I mean, obviously, it was a challenging year. Just see, I have it here. So overtime is almost gone. A couple of the reasons is I had two firefighters that have been out extended IOD. I was down several firefighters. One just retired. I got 2 more on staff. 2 from IOD are coming back. So I mean, I figuring out the COLAs. I just put it to 400,000. I think that's being realistic. Not a lot of big changes all the way down. Sick leave buyback is down because one of my firefighters is retired, so I had to bring that up when he got retired. You know, uniform expenses, that's just gone up just because the average price of stuff is going up. The uniform allowance, that was negotiated in contract, that's why that's. You know, you go down, the same thing, the maintenance and the repairs is doing very well. And that's a kudos to our, you know, town mechanic. We've got a great town mechanic. Does a great job and helps me. And no matter what time of the day, he is there. Can't say enough about Ben for what he's done for us in the time he's been working for the town. Same thing, the fire alarm expense is pretty much the same. Radio service, just a little increase just because the prices of stuff is slowly, like the price of batteries is going up. Fire overtime, basically I'm gonna leave the same. Training is gonna leave the same. Haulers leave the same. Miscellaneous expense, we seem to be able to cover it with that, leave it the same. The fire equipment, the same, pretty much the same. In the past, the original budget I put in, I put the fire prevention officers below and then it kind of didn't get in the last budget or really have much discussion. So I ended up moving it up and putting it on my last amendment, which was today, put it in there so you can see it. And then your question, how do I rise at 200,482? It's just basically 2 fire prevention officers at their pay plus their benefits. Kind of just lumped it all together. So that's
Where is that, Chief?
very, very bottom, right under fire equipment, fire prevention officer.
I see, it's in there.
Yeah, because I had it underneath it before saying it wasn't in the budget. Then I figured it's easier if I just put it up and you can see really what it changes the budget.
And how many, it's
2.
plural. So that's $100,000 each.
with the benefits.
Oh, that's with benefits.
But, yeah, that's, everything's just lumped
And
into one.
benefits in the town, is it roughly 30%?
Yeah, you know, I put in like, Michael, like the holiday pay.
Yeah, but is it about 30%? Fringe is about 30%, yeah, somewhere. That right?
And then the sheet that Angela handed out for me, the 30 items, that's just basically a list of things for fire prevention. You know, their duties and their jobs. Not to sit here and read them all, but there's a lot of them that we just can't do. I do what I can amongst these, and the firefighters do exactly what they can, but there's a lot of them in here that just, it's not human. Some of the things that, you know, the firefighters, basically their biggest job is they do the smoke detector inspections, the CO inspections. And then they do a lot of the propane inspection. But the problem is if you have a database with all the propane tanks in Clinton, you're supposed to redo those permits annually, and you're supposed to go and inspect them. You know, some people do it, some people don't. We just don't have the amount of staff to try to maintain. And a lot of these things just don't. Dumpster permits, there's dumpsters everywhere. That you're supposed to have permits, you can't enforce that. It's not humanly possible. And a lot of the other smaller things I do the best that I can. Firefighters do jump in and do the fire drills at the schools that help out and do all that. But there's a lot of things that are not getting lots.
Do they need special schooling and training and degree?
Yeah, fire prevention officer. Special schooling for that. And you have to maintain your credentials. So you have to constantly maintain, like your EMT license, because it's the code is ever changing.
Is there anybody in our system who can do that and hire someone else?
Right now, I don't know if he actively has he has his training, but I don't know if he's maintained his part of his license, but there is one individual in the department that I know has it. I'm not gonna say he wants a job, I'm saying I know one has it.
That's a possibility of getting him and
Yeah.
hiring someone in his
Correct.
place.
There's a possibility. So basically, as far as the fire department budget goes, it's really,
Are you down to,
yeah, I'm down to, yeah.
and do you have somebody like in ECAT or somebody
I'm,
lined up?
no, I'm looking. It's just, you know, the process, you know, as you know, you gotta wait for civil service to come up with the list, and then you gotta start the process. And it's not that easy, you know? But yes, I am down to. So then, you know, all the other sheets just show the salaries on the firefighters and then, let's see. So the ambulance, basically it's wages, the holiday. Diane basically gives me a hand and sets the benefits, the ambulance expense, paramedic stuff times 8. We're gonna just nix that because till we kind of come sit together here, he's gonna give us numbers, and like I said, I'll check with and see what's availability on the list for Mary Rose and discuss that. So kind of withdraw that. So then you basically, the rest of it's just your EMT compensation pay, all your training pay, your miscellaneous expense, your ambulance overtime. Ambulance overtime is basically, our ambulances leave Clinton like every single day of the week. It's just, we're out of town every day. Sometimes we're out of town 3 times a day. So every time that ambulance leaves Clinton and we drop below 5 firefighters, we have to staff back to 5. And that's where that comes from. It doesn't come out of the fire department all the time. It comes out of the sword. So that's what that 75,000. And the 5,000 is just basically, you know, the cost of living adjustments and just raising that, knowing the overtime is going to trickle up a little bit. The maintenance pretty much the same, and then the capital outlay is just a new ambulance. So one of the biggest thing is for this year is putting in for a new ambulance. Basically, the question at hand is, why are we putting in for a new ambulance when we have an ambulance that's only 3 years old. The reason being is ambulances right now are between 750 and up to 800 days out to get one. So in order for us to stay in the rotation of our ambulance is rolled back, not to have an ambulance that's too old, we need to order an ambulance this year because you're not going to get it for 2.5 years. So that's the only reason that I'm even entertaining, whereas our ambulance isn't that old, but in order to stay in the rotation, we have to order it.
And pay for it.
No, you don't pay for it till you get it. You just basically, Diane and I have had the discussion, she kind of helped me understand it, is it goes on the warrant and that money is appropriated, but it sits there.
Sure.
And it doesn't come out of the ambulance, the outlay, until we receive it. And just so you know, you're not bound. You're not bound. Even though you order it, you're not bound. They say if something happens and you can't take ownership of it, they'll sell it because they're that in demand. So it's not an issue with that, but it's a long wait to get an ambulance. And I'm glad we're not buying fire apparatus because fire apparatus is 3 to 4 years. 3 or 4 years right now. Just to give you a sense of last year, you guys appropriated the forestry one. So they said it was a year. So we appropriated it in June, July came, we had specs within a week. I'll say July 15th, we ordered that piece of equipment, knowing it was a year. Immediately got it done because that one's falling apart down. I just recently called and says, hey, can we get an update how the pictures are and looking and everything? And we ordered it in July of 23. He says there was another town, whatever it was, ordered one in November of 22. So 7 months prior to us, 8 months prior to us. They haven't even got the chassis. So my outlook for this year is not good at getting that forest. It's that bad. That's a forest. That's not even, your frontline fire. We're in good shape with that, thank God. We've my tenure, we've got a new engine, we've got a pickup truck, we've got the ambulance, but it's just looking down the tunnel. We got to at least order an ambulance sooner than later. It's going to be 2.5 years before you see it.
Mike, up and down further page, it's 500,000 for the new ambulance, and there you got 200,000.
200,000 where?
For the new ambulance, you had 200,000. I think that's what you said, right? But that's miscellaneous expenses, that's not.
Yeah, miscellaneous
I'm sorry,
expenses.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's just expenses. That's basically, where all of our medical equipment comes from, and then paying Sterling for what it provides us. That's what all those are for. And then the bottom numbers, basically Diane and I, as we get closer, discuss the retained earnings and the indirect costs. She's coaches me through that. You got any questions?
Any questions? Yeah, good. Any questions?
Sounds good.
Very good. Thank you very much, Chief.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Chief.
That's good.
All right, so the select board will be meeting next Wednesday. The 3rd, April 3rd.
We're all meeting to.
Have to ask,
Thank you very much for meeting. See,
When do we? April 3rd, right?
favorite.
Yeah. The same.